Non-alcoholic drinks. An alcohol-free or a non-alcoholic drink, also known as a temperance drink, is a version of an alcoholic drink made without alcohol or with the alcohol removed or reduced to almost zero. Ethanol distillation is used to separate alcoholic drinks into what are advertised as non-alcoholic drinks and spirits. However, alcoholic drinks cannot be further purified to 0% alcohol by volume by distillation. Although several brands market their non-alcoholic drinks with 0% on the package, most drinks labeled non-alcoholic contain 0.5% ABV, as it is more profitable than distilling it to 0.05 ABV, often found in products sold by companies specializing in non-alcoholic drinks. The government of Denmark has decided to change the alcohol-free legal definition from 0.1% alcohol by volume to 0.5%. This is due to the different taste of 0.5% than that of 0.1%. In Finland, non-alcoholic beverage means a beverage which contains a maximum of 1.2% by volume ethyl alcohol. In Italy, non-alcoholic beer termed as birra analcolica is regulated as equal to or less than 1.2% ABV. And in Norway, an alcohol-free drink is defined as under 0.7 alcohol by volume. Revenue at home, which is revenue generated from supermarkets and convenience stores in the non-alcoholic drinks market, amounts to $202.5 billion in 2024. Revenue out of home, which is restaurants and bars, amounts to $304.6 billion in 2024 in the United States. The revenue at home is expected to grow annually by 2.6%. The non-alcoholic drink market is expected to grow at home by 0.8% in the United States in 2025. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are and whatever you're doing. We truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guest. He's Kraig Rovensky. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Kraig, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Kraig, last time I saw you, you had the longest line at Bar Convent, Brooklyn, consistently. And it was the swag. You hand out the best, you offer the best swag. But when I saw people tasting the Pathfinder and what you were offering, it just seemed like everybody lingered and they wanted to talk about the Pathfinder. What is the Pathfinder?
Yeah, the Pathfinder is a fermented and distilled non-alcoholic hemp seed-based bitter elixir. So think like the world of Italian Amaro or vermouth, but no alcohol.
Now, it says patented right on the bottle. What was the process to get patented? And, what is it that distinguishes this as a patent?
Yeah, so we spent about 2 years doing liquid development, making many different variations of what we had. But the patent process is our actual distillation process, and what separates us from other NAs is the fact that we don't remove any of the alcohol. We talk a lot about what we put in. We don't remove anything, and so it's that process itself that's just very distinctly ours.
It's almost like, and I guess to the layman terms, is it almost like a decaffeinated coffee in a way?
I mean, when you think about decaffeinated coffee, again, you're talking about the removal of something in the
I guess
process.
so.
It's a removal of caffeine. So for us, it's our fermentation process is a very low alcohol. So the way I kind of describe it is if you think about kombucha is a very low fermentation, but brings a lot of flavor to the game. So it's bringing out a lot of flavor through the enzymes in the fermentation process. But that also means our distillation process is also lower on the alcohol scale. So, and then by the time we add in everything else, whether that be water to proof down or whether that just be our tinctures and other things that were created with lower alcohol content, we get down to 0.5% or below that, which is legally not alcohol according to the government.
You said it's been a 2-year process. Take us through the inception. How did the idea come about through some of those steps to get it to where it's in the bottle now?
Yeah, sure. So for that, I guess I can kind of tell you about our founding team. So the whole idea for the brand, the whole idea for the liquid that ended up getting created was a conversation between two of our founders, a guy named Chris Abbott, who runs Botanica, which is a weed company out of Washington State, responsible for some edible brands, Journeyman and Mr. Moxie's being his two big ones. And a guy named Guy Escalon. Guy worked for Diageo for years, most recently running Johnny Walker Worldwide on the branding side, but he also worked in emerging brands for Diageo. He had I love to throw this fact around. He had the pleasure of introducing Captain Morgan's Cannonball to the country of Italy, which is just a very random fact about Guy. But Guy was consulting on Chris's weed companies essentially, and the conversation one night turned to what's the future of the back bar. It's non-alc and it's cannabis. As we've seen cannabis become a lot more part of culture here in America and worldwide. But what would a true cannabis spirit look like? What if cannabis one day sat on the back bar next to alcohol? As it probably one day did way back in the golden age of cannabis in the 1830s to the 1930s when cannabis was legal here in America. So if you're thinking about a true cannabis spirit, what would that look like? Well, when you think about whiskey, you think about the grains. When you think about gin, you think about juniper. But so truly a cannabis spirit would have to be made from cannabis. It would be made from hemp. It would be made from the cannabis plant itself. But clearly you can't do that. You can't make a spirit out of cannabis right now. Or if you can make liquids that have THC in them, sure, but the red tape is so immense, it's a forest that you can barely see through. But non-alc is also booming. And in the world of non-alc doesn't come from something. There's no story really attached to a lot of the brands that were on the market. And if you were to create a true THC cannabis spirit one day, to start it as a non-alc and get the word out and get like that brand identity forming, you can make a non-alcoholic product that is made from hemp seed and behaves in a bar and belongs in a bar, but is free of all that red tape, no THC, no CBD, but truly born from cannabis, so born from the idea of it. Guy and Chris took that idea to a gentleman named Stephen Grass. Stephen created the brand of Hendrix, not the actual gin, but the brand world that surrounds it. And he also created the branding of Sailor Jerry's rum. So true, just like genius as far as branding goes. He owns a branding agency out of Philadelphia called Quaker City Mercantile. They are responsible for Guinness, for Narragansett beer, for Miller High Life, for you name it, brands across the gamut in the world of alcohol, and are some of like the cutting edge pushers as far as what branding can be in the world of booze. But Stephen never done anything non-alcoholic, so we approached him with the idea of what would this look like. And over the next 2 years, we developed the liquid with a couple of people out of the UK who are like the foremost experts on building non-alcoholic liquids. So taking an idea that could easily be done with alcohol, you can ferment and distill grain pretty easily and infuse that pretty easily. But when you're speaking of having no alcohol, there's a lot more technicality there. So working with the people who are the experts in the field, and then also spent 2 years just really building a brand world. What does the world of Pathfinder look like that goes beyond the liquid?
To speak of, or have, you're naming, it's almost like watching the All-Star game for baseball and hearing about all these players that are involved, very smart people, very knowledgeable, experienced people with an intent, as you talk about, to bring this non-alcoholic, but more this hemp cannabis-based idea to market. And I look at the story, because you talk about 2 years to build a story. I look at the labeling and the packaging, and it's captivating and it's drawing, and there's so much there. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, again, we were inspired by that golden age of cannabis, the 1830s to the 1930s. So old timey feel. We wanted it to look like something that had been on the back bar for a long time, and we were truly just inspired by snake oil salesmen, and the thing that they would like. So these bold claims of the things that we can do. You know, we can cure cold feet and ennui and all these other things we claim across our branding. Really just inspired by that, and looking at a lot of these like cannabis products that existed back then. I mean, there was cannabis in everything. Like you could, if you name it, your drug companies had some form of a cannabis product in their portfolio. It was everywhere. It was in tinctures. It was in alcohol. It was in lotions. But as far as we could find, no one had ever distilled it. No one had ever fermented and distilled it. Not to say no one did, but we couldn't prove that. So that was a huge entice for us too, is to do something that truly no one had done before. To be able to take a product and bring it to market that no one had made.
Pardon the interruption. Thank you so much for listening to Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Could you do us a favor? Hit that follow button. It makes it easier for others to find us, and it helps us climb in the rankings. Take a screenshot of the podcast, post it, tag us, and let everyone know that you listen to the Fermented Adventure podcast. Now, back to our podcast. As you brought this to market, what were some of those aha moments as you started to philosophize, if that's a word, the idea to getting it to the consumer? What were some of those aha moments what you were receiving back?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, we were inspired again by cannabis. We also, if you look at that same time frame, we were inspired by a lot of the big Amaro brands. All got their start during the 1830s and 1930s. But that also didn't really set us up for an easy, hey, we're here, everyone buy it, when we are made from hemp, which has a lot of misconceptions around it. People see hemp or that plant in general, and they think THC, they think weed, they think CBD right away. Amaro, though, in my circles is quite a common word to hear, is still not like a general term heard in the greater sphere of the world. So coming out by being like the closest thing we're akin to is something you also don't understand. And bitter is something that not a lot of people enjoy. Just by human nature, bitter is poison, and you want that not in your system. So we really came out with three big things that make it hard to sell into a general person's household. I think for us, it was learning how to just make it as approachable as possible. So talking about a bitter elixir, having it so it's like, you know, though you can sip it neat, as I see that you are right now, it's not for everybody. So also being able to like top this with soda, lighten it up a little, bring out some of those more floral and lighter notes was really like helpful in being able to be like, you know, this is going to be polarizing and we have to learn how to make it as approachable as possible. But also for the people that love it, they're going to love it. You know, as someone like, I've been working in Amaro bars for most of my bartending career. And so for me, that was like, I wanted to make something that as a bartender, as someone who loves like intricate and like you're kind of wild and esoteric side of the drinks world, I wanted to make something for myself. I want to like be able to back something that truly speaks to what I enjoy. But again, I don't like what everyone else likes. And so it's learning how to make that as approachable as possible.
Your entrance into the world of bars and spirits, how did that get started for you?
Yes, I was a band guy before I got into bars. So toured with bands as a manager and a merch guy for years, and pretty young and on into it. You know, I'm from Canada, so I could drink legally at 18, but I made it a mission everywhere we went. I wanted to experience what that place had to offer. So the local coffee, the local beer, the local cocktail bar, the local flavor. I wanted to see like what was happening, what's going on. And as such, I kind of found, you know, the weirder esoteric spirits pretty early on, traveling through Europe. And, you know, being the 18-year-old kid that was buying bottles of Amaro and bringing them on the bus because that just like I was obsessed with them. So I got really into that whole esoteric side of spirits, you know, in the late 2000s, early 2000 teens. And when I decided I didn't want to tour anymore, that lifestyle just wasn't for me anymore, the looking at the world of bars just kind of made sense. I already knew a lot of the products that these bars were carrying. I just didn't learn. I didn't know the flow of being a bartender. And I was pretty blessed early on. My ex-wife was David Kaplan at Death & Co.'s cousin. So my first bar job was at Death & Co. in New York City. I got to sit at Todd Wachowski's bar at Attaboy for, Milk and Honey back then, and learn from some of the early pioneers in our industry. And took that knowledge, moved to Seattle, and I got to be involved in a couple different bar programs over there, and then created my own bar. I still help run the day-to-day called Life of Mars. And when I got approached to join this project, what came right around the time during COVID, when I was just getting really, really frustrated with running a bar during COVID. And this was an easy transition out where I could get behind and help launch and bring something to market that truly fit with a lot of things that I believed in and lined up with. So
we are still, I would say, so much in the infancy of non-alcoholic. And I think you're on the West Coast, we're on the East Coast. I think the perception may be more accepting on the West Coast, and more inviting to people, starting to more on the East Coast. But really, where do you see the introduction of the Pathfinder and the growth of non-alcoholic?
yeah, I mean, it's the fastest growing spirits category technically, but that fast growth and that amount of growth is still far, lower than general alcohol for sure. And yeah, Seattle is certainly, I would say, the best market for it in America. I would say it's where the most amount of brands have proper distribution. And it's, even when we launched 3 years ago, I would say you'd be average of 1 out of every 10 menus had a non-alc section, which is still a decent chunk for the amount of bars in the city. I'd say that's the exact opposite now. It's about 9 out of 10, with 1 not having one. And a lot of that has just been our presence in market. And then we kind of helped grow that led the charge per se. And our distribution partner there has built an entire non-alc portfolio around us. They're utilized us as kind of the flagpole for it, and which is awesome to have a distribution partner that truly believes in us and has helped lead the charge for us. But yeah, on that same token, we had launched into Florida last year, and Miami specifically as a test market, and it's been hard. It's non-alc is still laughed out of bars. It's still not seen. But the interesting thing is, and the reason I bring up Miami specifically, if you look at the actual consumer trends of where consumers are spending their money on non-alc, and I should say that this is the whole category in general. So we're counting non-alc beer and wine, and a lot of that money should be pointed out is being spent on non-alc beer and wine. Where if you look at alcohol, it's about 50-50 as far as sales between beer and spirits. For NA, it's closer to 85-15. And so it's huge beer market in NA. But Miami is one of the best markets in America for NA beer. And that proves that the consumer wants it. The bar just hasn't caught up. And for me, it's I can think back to myself 5 years ago. I wouldn't have laughed NA out of the bar, but it took me a long time to get behind Seedlip. I could not justify bringing in something that cost that dollar amount, when in my head, I was like, I can make a non-alc drink pretty quickly with, juice, sugar, teas, or whatever it is. And I don't want to make it, be a child drink at all. I still make it be adult, but it's grasping that mind, and also thinking of I could think of some of my bar mentors posting things like, people go to bars to drink. They don't go here for not drinking, And so this whole mentality that I've watched shift in myself over the decade is I'm watching shift in other people. And it's very easy to see people who are still on that further extreme of the spectrum who literally can't comprehend why anyone would want to come into their bar and order something that doesn't have alcohol in it.
Where you're talking about is such a groundswell of the narrative. And I say that because I'm one of those people that if you would have said 5 years ago, what's the point? Like you said, if have a Coke or have a seltzer, if you want non-alcoholic, club soda. Yeah. I'm here at the bar to experience the skills and talents of the bartender, and that's what I enjoy. The byproduct sometimes is I don't want to be that inebriated. And my mindset is changing to where I've had a couple of cocktails. I'm really enjoying the atmosphere. I don't want to go to anywhere else, and I'd like to stay here and enjoy the party. And having that non-alcoholic offering to me is like, that's my go-to now. And that sounds interesting. And that sounds like I can have something in front of me and it actually looks like a cocktail and tastes like something interesting, which is why I love the Pathfinder. And you brought me back to my first opportunity as I'm opening this and sipping this at Bar Convent. I was the guy walking around Bar Convent with a coffee cup. So I could spit back everything I was trying from booth to booth so I can remain sober and have really coherent conversations. And I come to yours, and you and I are cut from a lot of the same cloth. I love Amaros. I love bitterness. I love flavor. And that you're offering this to me is saying to me, as a consumer, I think you get me. It's just a matter of you finally gave me something that I can latch onto. Versus something we feel like we're forced to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, alcohol has dominated the way in which we feel we have to socialize. And when you going back, it's like for so long, it was bitters and soda. It might be the most complex, interesting drink that you could order that didn't have alcohol in it. But that doesn't make you feel like you are there. It makes you feel like you're still left out. That's the sober drink. That's the drink that you have if you're not drinking, but it doesn't entice you the same way that a cocktail does. And it's not crafted. It doesn't have a story. It doesn't feel like what everyone else has. So you feel left out. And I think, it's like I've watched my own evolution in this space as I've thought about non-alc drinks in the past. And there's only so much you can do with the means that a bar normally has. So juice, sugar, other like syrups and other things. And you can still make some decently creative cocktails if you have creative syrups and you have creative things on your menu that do that. But what if you don't? Like, what if your only options are mint and lime juice and soda water? That's not as interesting. It's not as complex, and it doesn't hit all the same things in the brain as like sitting down and enjoying just literally a glass of Pathfinder on its own, on the rocks with the twist if you want. But it didn't even need to be that. But it was when I was looking at a lot of the other products that were on the market at the time, they all didn't deviate too far away from that. They lacked texture. They lacked a body and mouthfeel. And they were all like, everyone talked about what they didn't have, no sugar, no booze, no this and this and this. It's like, I don't not drink the times that I decide to not drink for whatever reasons so that I can avoid things. I still want to have just as much fun as I would if I was drinking. I don't feel like I need to get blasted every night anymore. I've had that time. That's over now. But I want to feel like I'm getting the same amount of interesting things and that same complexity. So
one of the things you pointed out with the bottle and the design of taking this back to that time of cannabis and all that you spoke of, but I almost feel like I'm going to the pharmacy, right? The drugstore, and the pharmacist would concoct something and create things out of roots and different spirits or something there to lift your spirits. It says, right on here, weak knees and, low spirits and drinking this kind of amps up my spirits and really makes me feel good. I love, as you pointed out, a couple of things, the mouthfeel, the citrus aspect. There's like a lemon lime to me, the consistency on the palate. The best thing for me is bringing that all together. And now I can let that linger and I get all the roots and the spiciness and the things that you brought to it. I could just sit here and just enjoy that mouth taste.
Yeah.
Sip and enjoy. And it's full of flavor. It's bold and it's interesting and it's fun. And kudos to everybody that came together to create this, because it makes me feel like there's something out there that I've been dying to have and I've always wanted to have. And, I don't have the ability to create it, but somebody else did.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, for me, it's like, I think that there's a place in the world for seedlit. and seedlip has a fair amount of flavor, but it's also just distilled water at the end of the day. It doesn't hold the attention the same way. And it's not like, like when you think about the greatest dishes of food, like texture is a huge piece of what makes a great dish a great dish. And if the flavor is there, but it lacks that texture, it just feels like it's lacking something. Our brain knows it's missing a piece, like it's the same with, there's a number of different brands on the market that use like artificial thickeners to get past that, but that still just doesn't feel the same. Like your mouth can tell it's not real, like it's lacking like just a pureness to it. There's an authenticity that's missed, I guess you could say. And to me, like, we have no artificial preservatives. We have no artificial sweeteners. There's nothing artificial about Pathfinder. It's all real. It came from somewhere. There's so many stories of how it all came together. and you get to like have that part of it. But yeah, it has sugar in it. And of course, it has sugar to help drive that body, to help drive that flavor home. It has half the amount of sugar that Fernet does. So if this is about cutting back, you're not drinking any alcohol at all, and you're having half the sugar.
This even gets better every time you talk about it. And knowing that I'm even cutting the sugar consumption too. But to your point, if you're somebody that really, is looking to be more healthy, even just more healthy, and that there's this for you. There's this here in its component that you're not using thickening agents. It's all natural. The Pathfinder, what is the future for Pathfinder? Is this the one product? Are there other things in the works right now?
So we definitely took a page out of Hendrick's book, which, Hendrick's launched, don't quote me exact time frame on this, but I believe it was 13 years ago. And Hendrick's was just Hendrick's for years. There was just one product. Very recently, over the last 5 years, they started putting out limited edition releases. They'll do, one or two a year. But for, the first decade of its life, it was basically one product. And Hendrick's is everywhere. Dive bar, sports bar, high-end cocktail bar, duty-free shop at the airport. Hendrick's is ambiguous. It's everywhere. It also looks like it's just always been there. That, again, great branding. So for us, we wanted to launch with one flavor. It is just Pathfinder. And we're going to be meticulous to like an insane degree on just being Pathfinder. Now, I'm not going to leave out that we might do like an RTD or a limited edition run sometime in the future. When we were doing liquid development, we came up with a lot of incredible things, a lot of different variations on the same kind of design, other herbal liqueurs, but this was by far the best. And like, the one that we thought was not just the best on the flavor profile, but the best as far as like, what's the most, approachable while still being polarizing. So as far as flavor goes, it will probably only just be one thing for a very long time, but not leading out that we won't do other things with that one flavor.
You pointed out that you're following in that mindset of Hendrick's, and it's everywhere. Pathfinder, you talked about opening up in a couple of markets. Where can people find Pathfinder now?
Yeah, so I mean, we are non-alc, so we can ship anywhere across America. We have a number of wholesale partners in multiple different states, but we're very focused. We have a small and amazing group of brand ambassadors that have brought us into Washington, Oregon, California, Illinois, New York, and Florida. We are we will be launching Colorado, DC, and Texas all in the new year, starting to seed with proper distribution this fall, which is really exciting. We're looking at hiring one more brand ambassador in Texas, actually, hopefully by the end of the month. Fingers crossed on that one. We're interviewing right now, which is exciting. It's our last brand ambassador that we're going to bring into the fold for now. The idea being that we have 6 brand ambassadors that kind of split America. Each one gets their region, and we're going to go for, domination that way. Launching over the next 2 years, we'll be launching 3 states every 3 months is the plan, which is a pretty aggressive and daunting, but also insanely exciting proposal that I'm really looking forward to getting into. had the benefit and joy last year of signing a distribution investment deal with Stoli Group, Stoli Vodka. They led our round of fundraising or led our round of raise, and part of that deal was we would get distribution anywhere in America that we wanted to go through them. So we get to be a small brand, still independent. Like, we get to control our own, brand, but we get to be in a large distribution umbrella. So Stoli will go to bat for us. So instead of being a tiny brand and a big distribution company, we'll still have the power of a big distro, which is awesome. Certainly incredibly exciting for the future for us. But the easiest way for everyone else in any other state is Fair and Air Goods. You can sign up for a wholesale account on either of those websites and order direct through there. And pretty decent proposal for a bar with $25 per bottle and make a tasty bevy. So,
yeah, what I'm going to recommend is, look, I mean, you hit on a couple things. If I own a coffee shop, or even something like a non-alcoholic bar that I want to set up, this should be on your bar. This is really something I think you're going to have a lot of raving fans. They're going to keep coming back and asking for this. I enjoy this too because, before we came on, I was working out and I didn't have to have concern about, all that depletion, electrolytes, and, all the liquid. And now I'm coming on and I'm going to start drinking. I look forward to this with you today, Kraig, because I knew, hey, I have a non-alcoholic conversation today and it worked for me. But the other thing you could do with this, you can mix this with alcohol. And there's so much flavor here that, your friends are going to stop and say, what'd you put in that? And they're going to say, I can't believe that's that's something non-alcoholic either. Yeah.
I mean, one of my personal favorite ways of drinking it is equal parts with a Laird's apple brandy on the rocks with an orange twist, kind of like a low ABV apple brandy Manhattan, essentially. But yeah, it super works with almost any single spirit I've ever thrown at it. I can't really find a flavor profile that just is like, absolutely, these two things will not go together. But you get to lower the ABV of your drink. So instead of having 1 to 2 Manhattans, or if you're coming at this from a bar perspective, instead of being able to sell 1 or 2 Manhattans to someone, you could sell 3 or 4 at a lower alcohol. You get the ability to drink more if you want to, which, it's just, and have something that still tastes just as great, if not better in some ways, for whatever, your flavor is that you're going for. Okay, I have to try that Laird's cocktail. Lisa at Laird's, I know she's going to they're going to come out somewhere on social media, maybe making one of those with the Pathfinder. So that'll be fun. And if they don't, we will. So we'll get to them on the punch. Kraig, is there anything we haven't talked about on the podcast today? Anything you want people to know about more about the Pathfinder? Oh, good question. I don't know. I feel like we've talked through most of my good talking points. I think, I guess for one thing, we could talk a little bit more about like the actual how it's made, the full process that goes into it. Just something for a little more of your nerdier listeners for sure. Because there is a lot of question for it. It is, again, different than how you make an actual alcoholic drink, yet surprisingly very similar. And I think that there's a lot of like, when people think, when you think of like making non-alc beer, the process doesn't have a whole lot more complexity to it. We've been making non-alc beer forever. When you think about non-alc spirits, the reason why it's taken so long to get to this point is because a lot of what goes into a lot of them is stuff that was not technologically available to us for so long. For us, again, we're a little bit more on the actual, like, we're using methods that have been in existence forever. Distillation and fermentation is not new by any means, but it's figuring out and how to get that much flavor across with such low amount of alcohol that for years has been something that no one's been able to do. Again, like Amaro, to me, thinking of that whole category of European herbal medicines, it wasn't ever about the alcohol. It was just the only way that they could get what they wanted out of those plant and botanical materials was with alcohol. It was just that was what you had to do. But all of that came about, well, not all, but all this stuff that came about 100 some years ago, all of that was medicine at one point in time. And even back then, there was an understanding that alcohol isn't really the best medicine, but it is the best way of getting these properties out of the botanicals. So it was kind of like the nature of the beast you had to use it to get it. And so for us, I love getting to talk to bartenders and share that like our process is very similar. It's fermentation. We add in a number of botanicals to distillation in a copper pot still that we use. And then we infuse some of the other botanicals in that mash with everything else. We also then infuse some of that separately on its own. And for anyone listening that would know that has made Amaro or bitters before, it's not just about using alcohol. It's about utilizing the alcohol level to get the flavors that you want out of something. If you think of steeping tea too long in water, it becomes very, very bitter. Because actually, the less amount of alcohol you use for a lot of the botanicals that you infuse into Amaro, the less amount of alcohol, the more bitter flavor you're going to pull from it. Higher amount of alcohol, you're going to get more of the oils and a lot of the things that lead to like a well-balanced and well-rounded, taste profile. But again, if you think about that tea, if you leave tea to steep too long, it becomes insanely astringent, insanely bitter, because a lot of things like wormwood, gentian, these botanicals you find in all your common Amaro get a lot more bitter if left just in water. And so for us, it was utilizing different levels of alcohol to pull out different styles of extractions to be able to then proof the what comes off the still down, utilizing things that are holding a lot of flavor. I was told by a bar mentor of mine years and years ago, when you're thinking about diluting a drink, you're adding 30% some water to a drink. That's 30% of something that has no flavor. But if you're thinking about diluting a drink or diluting a syrup or whatever it is, what about replacing that water with something that has flavor to it? So your drink's getting more flavor while also getting down to a dilution level that is more palatable, and chilling it, of course, which is important. And so that's kind of the way, if you think about it, we've utilized Pathfinder. It's we're proofing what we are making utilizing alcohol down with something that holds just as much flavor as the actual distillate itself.
Even today, how do you go about sourcing all these ingredients? Are they readily available, grown close by? Are you sourcing them throughout the world?
Certainly a bit of a combo of both. A lot of it is being sourced from all around the world, utilizing bigger companies to find what we need. But some of it is close to home. Our Douglas fir that we're utilizing for Pathfinder, it's Douglas fir tips. So it's the stuff that just as they start to kind of bloom, we're getting those hand picked for us. A guy that lives in Washington State actually goes and hand picks every single one of them that we end up using, which helps us tie back to our home. Seattle is where the brand launched. That's where the brand's from. And that gets to be a piece that we can literally say, like, each of those comes from here. Like each individual Douglas fir tip came from Washington State. So it's a little bit of column A, column B. It's, there's some things that we can't source close to home. Oranges do not grow in the Pacific Northwest, so there's just no way to do that. Well, they don't grow well. I can't say I've seen a couple citrus trees, but it's not a mass crop, of course. But the idea is, we wanted to utilize as much as we could from the local environment and the local economy, but it's impossible to do everything. So
we were talking offline before the podcast started about working within the cannabis community as well and introducing the product or being introduced. There's a really good crossover here as well to that community. Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people, younger generation these days is drinking far less, but imbibing a lot more in cannabis or psilocybin or whatever other mind-altering, things on the market. And but they still want to feel like they belong when they're in the bar. And the liquid is how you do that. And so, as of right now, again, as we were saying offline, it's illegal to have THC in a bar, but you can smoke before and you can come in and you can drink, you can imbibe in something that has no alcohol. So you get to feel like you belong in the social structure of your friend group, but you're not, crossfading between the two. I guess, to even go back to that other question about what's the future of Pathfinder, the end goal for us has always been to have a THC spirit that sits behind a bar legally, of course, and belongs in that conversation. But, that's, again, the window of when that will be is unknown to us right now. And so for us, it's, being very focused on just being the NA product for now. But that would be the goal, is to like have a product that is low THC. So, the thing I say all the time is like, think of the cigar and whiskey moment. You come home, you light a cigar and have a scotch on the back deck. Well, that would be the same, but instead it's a joint and a shot of Pathfinder, and the Pathfinder would have a small amount of THC to like continue the high from your joint. But for now, I mean, it's also like the idea is just to be part of that world. And, there is a fair amount of cannabis shops across the country that purchase us wholesale and sells in their shops right next to edibles and other things, because it's a companion for them. It comes from the same world, and it's something that like fits in that world for them. So,
well, Kraig, I am so glad that we waited in your line to meet with you at BarCon in Brooklyn to be introduced to the Pathfinder. It has opened our world and what we get to share with our friends and our listeners. This is something that no matter what the federal guidelines are, because I can't wait to those that change, because that's going to be really interesting to when you can formulate this in a way that it can partner and share some different properties. But I'm glad that we met you. Thank you so much for being a friend of Fermented Adventure. We can't wait to see more of the Pathfinder, in Pennsylvania, hearing more about your stories and journeys throughout the world. So thank you so much for sharing some time with us today.
Yeah, Rich, thanks a lot for having me. It was an honor to be on.
Thanks, Kraig. Cheers.
Cheers.